Tribe, have you ever looked at fear as a positive thing? There are two ways to look at fear, and today we're going to break down those two concepts so that you can actually leverage fear to your advantage instead of allowing fear to leverage you. Now, there are two kinds of fear. We're going to jump right into it. There is a healthy kind of fear, and then there is an unhealthy kind of fear. We're going to start on the healthy side. Be sure to take notes and leave your gems down in the comments of what you take away today. I greatly appreciate it. Now, I like to look at fear as an acronym. There are two acronyms that I learned that I absolutely love and adopted for myself because it helps me, okay? So fear, acronym for a healthy response, can look like this. So this acronym is going to be, well, I can't say this on YouTube, so I'm gonna skip that and instead replace it with forget everything and run or rage. Now, do you know where fear actually comes from? It originates from our amygdala. This is a part of our brain that sends a signal when we are in threat or an actual dangerous situation. So imagine standing in the middle of the jungle and then a lion appears 5 feet in front of you. Or imagine a situation where you're standing in the middle of a street and you turn around and you see a truck is going full speed 5 feet in front of you. This triggers the amygdala and helps us to figure out whether we need to fight or flight. This is a response that helps us to determine what we need to do next. Now, this is actually a range. There's a few things that happens when that amygdala is triggered. It might set off a fight response, it might set off a freeze response, or a flight or a hide response. It's up to you which words you want to use, but nonetheless, a lot of times you might figure that it's best to just stay still where you are, or that you need to run, or that you might need to put the dukes up. You know what I'm saying? You need to fight this situation, like with the lion in the jungle. I don't know who's crazy enough to fight a lion in the jungle, but just saying. These are what happen, right, when the amygdala is triggered. Our brain is wired for survival, y'all. Is wired to help us whether we need logical and practical advice or when we need creative expression. And so, our prefrontal cortex is what helps us to make a logical decision. So that is going to be healthy, right? We are the ones that get to preserve our own bodies. And so we need to make these decisions for our bodies. That's what the amygdala does. That's what fear does for us in the healthy sense. Now let's talk about the unhealthy sense. Let's change up the colors. Now the acronym for fear in an unhealthy sense is going to be so, in an unhealthy sense, the acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. Or you may have your own coined term for this that's something similar, but yeah, it's false evidence appearing real. It's not even real, y'all. This is what's called a perceived threat. This is not actually a threat. We just perceive it that way. So in this situation, this might be fear of losing a job, right? Fear of your partner not staying with you. Fear about creating content. I work with busy professionals all the time who shy away from starting content creation on their channels, even though it has the potential to bring them revenue into their business, all because of the fear that they have of being perceived. It is a perceived threat. This happens in the mind. It's actually not a real thing. But the thing is that when we perceive a threat, it's still triggering that amygdala. So we're still going to go and make a decision about what we need to do. Do we need to run from this thing? Do we need to fight this thing? Do we need to hide from this thing? Whether it's perceived or whether it's a real threat, this one is real. This one is not. Okay? Regardless, the amygdala is triggered and sends us into a response where we need to make a decision. So, now that we understand how fear can actually be leveraged to our advantage, where we're able to protect ourselves, where we're able to preserve our bodies. And then also how fear stops us from leaving that job that we hate, or even leaving that partner that's no longer good for us, or making any other decision that will actually help us, right? That has value and can help us, right? Now that we understand that, we get to do this next thing. But first, I want to label this because this is really important for us to understand, is that there is to everything two sides, even to fear. That's why we were able to break down these two concepts. There are two sides to this always. Positive side is the healthy side, clearly. This doesn't make it better than the unhealthy side, though. Negative side is going to be the unhealthy side. This is how we perceive positive and negative in our world, right? Is one thing is good, one thing is bad. But the thing about the law of polarity is that everything has two sides, equal and opposite reactions. So all in all, this becomes neutral. It's not about whether it's good or bad. That's terrible writing. Sorry, y'all. The positive and the negative becomes neutral anyway. It's not about good or bad. This isn't inherently bad, and this isn't inherently good. Okay? If you're going to decide to stay in the jungle and fight the lion, I mean, we could probably bank on who's going to win that one, right? You might have a better chance at running. So it's not inherently good, right? Or to put yourself in such a situation. And then also, it's not inherently bad that we are perceiving something that is a threat. Most of the time, we are going through a few things in our mind that will bring about fear. So now we're going to talk about that. Fear within the mind also originates from past experiences and anticipated future experiences. Okay? Past experiences and then future anticipated experiences, right? So this hasn't happened yet. And we can scare ourselves into all of the what if situations that might come about, that'll stop us from making any moves. We'll end up hiding, right? Or we'll end up freezing. The past already happened. We've already had this experience, or someone told us about the experience. So now we're being super mindful about how we make our decisions to move, right? So let's just say in the past, you burned yourself. You burned your hand, right? Ouch. Okay, so you burned your hand. That's your ouch. And then now you have created an experience for yourself that says fire is bad. Fire produces pain, right? So remember, there's a healthy sense and an unhealthy sense to this, right? There are times where we actually need to avoid fires, right? So because we want to avoid pain. So we're not going to walk up to a stove burner and place our hand directly on the stove, right? Because we know that that's going to equal pain. We want to preserve our body, so we're not going to do that, right? But this has already happened, right? We've already burned our hands before. Now we recognize, like, not only did mom tell me not to touch the stove because fire is hot, I've experienced it enough to know that it is unbearably painful. So I don't want to do that again. But now what happens is that we might be so fearful that our irrational response to this in the future is that now we can't even cook, because that's how much we are willing to avoid pain. I'm not going anywhere near the stove. I'm not going anywhere near the oven because I don't want that to happen again. we want to live rationally though, right? We want to leverage fear. It's good to be mindful about parameters, cautions, and boundaries around the stove, around the oven while we're cooking. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't cook anymore, right? Because a part of preserving our bodies is to feed it and fuel it. So that means that we essentially should learn how to cook. I mean, should is a word that I don't use very often because it's a loose word of something that doesn't exist. It's a hypothetical. Like someone might come back in the comments and be like, "Oh, I'll just hire a chef," and that's perfectly fine. You might actually be in the position to do that. However, the experience that lives in your mind and lives in your body is imprinted like a tattoo. It goes into the unconscious and the subconscious mind and lives there forever, where it'll constantly avoid the situation. So even when it came down to there's no more chefs in the world, or you're not in a situation where you can hire a chef, or whatever the case may be, if you had to preserve your own life or someone else's life through food, through cooking, you wouldn't be able to do that. Okay? And this is the thing, is it's unhealthy if it's hindering you from doing something because you're perceiving this as a threat. Now you perceive the stove as a threat when it's not. You just need to create boundaries around it, right? That's what's important. So that is going to be the past versus the future. Now, something that also happens for people is they'll associate even anxiety with fear, right? Still anticipation, it doesn't matter. If you're anticipating that you're going to fail your test, so you procrastinate when it comes to studying, that's unhealthy, right? Or maybe you stay up all night studying, and maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. But the thing is that we want to remain neutral. We want to be able to preserve ourselves in such a way that we feel good about the decisions that we're making, because we are keeping our boundaries even when we anticipate a perceived threat. Okay? So, whether your fear lives in the past because it's something that you've already experienced, or it's a concept that you've adopted from someone else. Like, you might have a partner where you tell your partner that you want to step down from the position that you're in at work, and they say, no, you can't do that. Like, you can't demote yourself because of what society would think about you, or because it'll be lesser money. And now you have a fear of coming out of a position that is no longer serving you, that doesn't work for you. You know that, you feel that every day that you go there, but the people around you, your outer circumstances, are now provoking you or influencing you to determine how you move about, right? It is inducing fear, loss of status, or the loss of your partner because of that situation, or even the loss of money, right? So now you're fearful, and you actually don't give yourself the opportunity to experience the limitless opportunities that exist in the world. Like, that's not the only job, that's not the only position that you get to experience just because you are already having this experience where it is providing you some of the things that's beneficial. Doesn't matter, right? Some things are going to be beneficial, and then some things are not, because everything has two sides. Everything has pros and cons. Everything has positives and negatives. So it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are able to move past the events that's happening within your mind and make a sound, rational decision for yourself that'll have a desired outcome, not just for you, but for everyone else around you as well. Finally, let's talk about what fear is in one word. Okay, let's wrap this up with one word. Fear is nothing more than a signal. And the signal still produces two things for you. It gives you a signal of whether you need to speed up or slow down. So remember, when we talked about it in the healthy sense, if we are literally in an imminent threat or danger, it's real, not perceived, it's real, a real threat, we might need to speed up, right? We might actually need to run, or we might at least need to make a quick decision. What do we need to do? We need to figure that out right now. Like, time is of the essence, okay? But then on the other end, especially for perceived threats, right? Perceived, I think this is important, repetition. and then real. For perceived threats, we want to slow down. So this means that we want to take a moment to induce somatic breathing. Because remember, even if it's a perceived threat, the amygdala is still triggered. So the body is still having a response that's like, hey, you need to make a quick decision. You need to make a quick decision. But typically, if we need to slow down is the opposite of quick, right? It's on the other side, baby. So we want to slow down. When the amygdala is triggered, it speeds up the breath. We sweat, right? Maybe it speeds up the breath. Sometimes it holds when we freeze, right? So all of these things, we want to get back to neutral. We want to bring the body back to homeostasis. So the way to do that, one of the ways to do that is through somatic breathing. Okay, maybe I call this conscious tapping, but that's not the official term. But the technique is to name things that you can see, hear, taste, touch, all of those things, right? That brings you back to the conscious present moment, right? Where all of the rational and logical thinking happens. Okay, so conscious tapping, somatic breathing, and then this is a good one, even if it's just one to have, it's just at least one affirmation. Period. Your affirmation can simply be, I am safe. That with breathing, maybe you need to repeat that a few times. It depends on how triggered you are. But regardless, that now allows you to bring yourself back to homeostasis, neutrality, where you're able to make rational and logical decisions, not based on fear. Now you get to leverage it. Why do I call it leverage? These, even though we talked about it being unhealthy, I mean, it's unhealthy if it is taking over. If fear is stopping you because you are perceiving things that's not a threat as a threat, that is unhealthy, okay? Some people actually really need to get out of their environments where they are unsafe and won't make the move to do it simply because it is so familiar. Fear, living in the state of fear is so familiar and habitual that they won't even allow themselves to find the opportunities to remove themselves to safety. Okay, that's why I say it's unhealthy. But why do I call it leveraging? To utilize these techniques, to practice these things, brings you to your desired outcome. So you might not need to make a quick decision, right? Instead, you might just need to slow down, breathe, allow yourself to be present, affirm, and then respond. Everything has a positive and negative fear, friends. Everything is a positive and negative. Fear is nothing more than a signal. And so I ask of you today, what's something that you were perceiving as a threat because of fear and that it's been hindering you? It's been stopping you from making the next best move for yourself. Like, you already know that it's the next best move for yourself, but the perceived threat has been stopping you. Is it fear of leaving a job? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? You end up homeless, right? That's scary. So that makes sense. But it's still a perceived threat. So is it fear of leaving a job? Is it fear of being alone, so you stay with a partner that's not good for you? And that's clear as day, right? Is it fear of going to the doctor because you haven't been feeling well? Maybe you're overweight and you know what they're gonna say. And so you're fearful of even taking that action, of receiving help, right? Are you scared of quitting an addiction? Cigarettes, alcohol, weed? Is that scary to you, to remove those substances, even though you know you may actually perform better, that you'll feel healthier, that you'll have more love, abundance, prosperity around you if you did? Perceived threats. If you're willing to share, drop that down in a comment below. And also, if you'd like to work further on removing those hindrances, those blocks, not removing fear, right? We need fear. We need fear from the healthy and even from the perceived threat side. Like, these are great techniques to practice. And if we didn't have fear, we wouldn't even have a reason to practice them, really, right? So what we want to remove is the blocks that happens when we're stuck in this state of awareness. Okay? So if you are aware that you're scared of making the next move and you would like additional help, I want you to click the link down below to create a discovery call with me so we can talk further more about that. Okay? And with that, my friends, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Be safe, be well.